I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 11, 2015 City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Can you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, if your members could put the microphones in front of court, and we'll give us some of that power.
Okay, microphones towards you, please, commissioners. Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis,
Here.
Rich Obertino, Jeff Moore,
Here.
John Number is here, Michael Daming,
Here.
David Devitt,
Here.
David Flefkoff.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Just barely. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Nuremberger. All right, first item on the agenda is the approval of the February 18th, 2015 meeting minutes. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, they'll stand as submitted. First item under old business is a petition for rezoning amendment to the Brentwood zoning map for 290 Hanley Industrial Court from LID to PD. Petitioner being Merriam Foundation for Merriam Switching Post on behalf of Kentley LLC. And the understanding is, we'll, just like we did at the last meeting, we'll take this in tandem with the other item under old business, petition for site plan and conditional use permit, approval to locate a warehouse use at 290 Hanley Industrial Court. Is the petitioner here?
We're here,
Yeah.
the representative.
Okay, would the applicant like to take another application in front of yours?
Number 2, please.
Okay, Chair will entertain a motion to take the first item of new business in front of the two old business items.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. First item we'll take up tonight under new business is a petition for site plan approval for entrance modifications at 90 Brentwood Promenade Court. Is the petitioner here? Yes. Will you please step forward, introduce yourself and your address for the record, and present your application.
Good evening. I'm Mark Harriman with BFA Engineering from Washington, Missouri, 679 Cardinal Court, representing the owner Gravoid Development Partnership. I respectfully request the approval of the minor site modifications proposed to 90 Promenade Court. The current zoning is Planned Development Overlay District. The current use is retail. This proposal does not change either one of the land use items. They will remain the same. What we're doing is some minor site modifications, as the agenda says. The existing facility has one set of steps coming up to the front door and a 5-foot walk and ramp. We want to take out the 5-foot walk and widen it to and put in a new 9-foot walkway for easier accessibility, as well as install a ramp to the south for more pedestrian access from the sidewalk. A proposed steel canopy for unloading merchandise put in the back. It will match the existing color of the facade of the building, which is not changing. The paint and the color of the ephes will remain the same, and the signage is proposed to remain as well. However, it will be switched out as soon as the new tenant is signed. The overall site coverage will be increased by 2.2% from 77.1 to 79.3. Again, and lastly, I would like to say there will be no change in the number of parking spaces, so that will remain as well. And at this point, I'd feel free to ask any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harriman. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject site is a 1.24 acre parcel. It's generally accessed through the Brentwood Promenade development, but it's actually part of the Brentwood Point development, although it's not connected to it. But that's how the original project was divided, and the approval was sought through it. As the applicant noted, they're proposing a minor amendment to the access to the building to provide more convenient access for both individuals who need the additional accessibility, as well as increased convenience for shoppers with shopping carts that may come in and out. The primary issue that staff had looked at with this was the open space calculation. The PD district does have a minimum site coverage of 65% with the additional 15% bonus that was in there. That was previously approved for the bonus with the site. Some of the landscaping was actually brought back around the corner of Hanley Industrial where they planted some trees in front of the industrial use along there to make up for that site coverage. Staff has reviewed the application and has no outstanding issues.
Seems like a pretty straightforward application. Questions from commissioners? Mr. Plopka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has any thought been given to the sign that sits to the south, the post sign? I mean, is there any realistic thought that it's communicating with Eager Road? I mean, it seems like it's so far back. I wonder if there might be some effort to perhaps either move it to the north side of the parcel, but make it a monument sign, make it something that's not 45 feet in the air. I mean, I just based on me driving there, I thought that if the goal was to get it so that you could see something from Eager Road and say, oh, that's the Golf Galaxy, the sign on the building is a lot more visible than the sign that's there. And I wonder if there'd be any effort on the applicant's part to want to maybe scale that down or at least lower it.
From our standpoint, we're wanting to reuse the sign since it's there, obviously. It's kind of tucked behind the PetSmart, so the signage being where it is on the south gives us a little bit better angle. So that was our thoughts to keeping the sign.
Does the ramp that's proposed interfere with it at all?
No.
It looks like on one of the...
It's close. It'll
Okay.
be close, but we'll have to detail that out and make sure that works. And
Okay. That's the only two questions I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Nurnberger?
I remember when this site was developed, it was kind of a strange site because it was part of the other development on the promenade, and then that part was down on the other end or whatever. It was a hill on that side. So I remember that we kind of gave in a little bit on the pole sign because they were really insistent upon them being able to communicate to the rest of the site, because like you said, PetSmart is out in front. You don't really see their sign until you drive all the way into the whole development or whatever. So that was a rationale a little bit for doing that. I think, any improvement to the site, but it really, I don't think there's much that can be done, barring what we've done in the past, to really improve the site. So I just want to kind of let you know what the rationale for doing that in the past was. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a speculative project? Do you have any tenants in mind? I'm just kind of curious as it relates to parking.
I think they are fishing for somebody. I do not know that. I haven't been privy in those negotiations or agreements that BRR has been working with the owner. So I can't speak to that. I think they are trying to get somebody with this approval, yes. So we can move forward with it.
Okay, I would remind the commission, and as of note to the owner, that with the parking restrictions of the promenade, particularly the difficulty that we went through recently with the Micro Center and the relationship with Dobbs, I think Golf Galaxy has been a low-demand tenant on the parking lot. And I would speculate that somebody that goes in might be a higher use. And we might end up having that cross-parking problem that would perpetuate.
I think that's a good point. Mr. Wise, can you speak to what requirements we would have in order to issue an occupancy permit to the new tenant?
So any new tenant that were to come in would either through submitting a business license or just generally calling in, inquiring, would call in. We would review this parcel, because it's not part of the actual promenade, has been separate from the shared parking. It's not included in that initial promenade parking agreement. So this park does and is required to meet the parking codes as it stands alone. There's no reductions or no shared parking agreements that allow this site to have less parking. So when that comes in, one of the first things that staff will look at is the use permitted at that location. And then one of the next things will be, is there sufficient parking based off of the use that they've submitted? If either of those turns out, if it were to be a conditional use, they would have to come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then ultimately to the Board of Aldermen for approval. If they were to run into a parking issue, they would likely have to come back through the process as well, or it wouldn't work out, one of the two.
Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this petition? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the building entrance modifications contained and identified as case number 15-03.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
John Nermer is yes. David Dimmitt,
Yes.
David Plefka.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wise, next step for this petitioner?
Next step is they will be before the Board of Aldermen for the final site plan approval.
All right, Mr. Harriman, did you hear that?
Well, I've talked to him already.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Mr. Harriman. Okay, Mr. Goldman, are we ready? Or do we want to take the other item under new business next? Okay, next item under new business is a petition for conditional use permit and site plan approval for a dog kennel and training facility with accessory retail use at 1695 South Hanley Road. Petitioner being No Leash Needed LLC. Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward, ma'am, introduce yourself, your address, and your application.
Hi, my name is Davica Christie. I'm one of the managing members of No Leash Needed, and the subject property we're looking at is 1695 South Hanley. That property is sandwiched behind the Home Depot and APA. Kind of hard to see it unless you go back there. So we are, our company has been in business for 5 years. Like is mentioned in the application, we do dog training along with dog kenneling and daycare. Over the past 5 years, we've grown into 3 locations, and we've learned a lot about dog kennels and what residents like and don't like, and we're here to kind of address some of the issues and concerns that you might have regarding a special use permit.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Christie. Where are you moving from?
We're right now, at 9330 Manchester,
Rock Hill?
Rock Hill, right.
Okay. Mr. Wise, staff report?
The subject property is zoned LID, Light Industrial District. Under the Light Industrial District, the pet boarding facilities, including the daycare and overnight boarding for domesticated cats and dogs, is a conditional use permit. So that's why they're here before you this evening. We have sent out public notices to all property owners within 300 feet. As the applicant mentioned, they're set back off of Hanley Road. It's very difficult, if even possible, to see the building from the frontage of Hanley Road. They have a shared ingress and egress easement with the adjacent parcel that allows them access back to the building. Staff has reviewed it. One of the primary concerns, we do happen to have another similar type of use in town has been of concern in the past. So the primary concern is, of course, the potential impact on residential properties in particular, but of the neighborhood in general. So in looking at that, the APA, as noted, is immediately to the north of it. They have dogs that are already outside. There have been no complaints about the noise at that location that I've been aware of. When I look at if you look at page 2 of the staff report, it's got a blue line that basically kind of shows the distance from the back property line to the closest residential home. It's about 1,700 feet away, so it's substantially further than a lot of the other locations in Brentwood. In addition, there is a Metrolink track immediately behind it, and then several other buildings that would serve to block any potential noise from the residential areas. So with those findings, staff has not identified any additional issues and is supportive of the request.
So I think the point about it not having any frontage along Hanley is critical. In any event, in my review of this application, that was critical for myself, and I'm interested in finding out whether or not there are any property owners, adjacent property owners who have come to tonight's meeting. Mr. Plopka?
Justin, you've marked the 1,700 feet distance between residential property to the south. What about Hanley Station to the north? How close is that? Because isn't there condo residences in that?
There are.
Isn't that closer than 1,700 feet?
It would be closer. I guess the predominant reason for looking south, quite frankly, just looking at the aerial, I probably missed Hanley Station because it's a little bit easier to miss. And then I guess the other thought was there's already an existing use similar to this closer, a parcel north that would be along there.
Right, with the APA.
Correct.
But what is the scale of the APA's operation and the number of dogs that are outside anything to compare to what this applicant will use?
I think that would be a great question for the applicant.
So we are aware of the issues you had with the other daycares in the area, and our business is a lot different. We don't keep 120 dogs running around outside. Our business for boarding is usually between 35 to 40 maximum capacity overnight. We keep our numbers smaller. We're a kennel, but we're primarily a dog training facility. So the majority of that space is used with clients and their dogs together. So we keep our noise down because we're actually training, not just letting dogs kind of run around.
So what if your capacity is what you say overnight? How much bigger is the number of dogs during the day? If you've got
During the day, we can get probably up to about 50 or 60 dogs that are separated into different yards. So it's not one yard that's making a lot of noise. We have indoor yards and outdoor yards. So those groups will be divided into groups of 15 to 25 dogs, depending.
So is that 50 or 60 dogs in addition to the ones that are being kenneled there?
No, that's all together.
Okay. Justin, did notices go out to Hanley Station?
If you look at the,
Oh, I guess they're just beyond it.
yeah, so
Okay.
if you look at the site
All right.
plan that the applicant, that shows the 300-foot
That's
radius.
right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Demmett?
Justin, do you know what the distance is between the watering hole and the residences up on Porter, I think it is?
I don't know the exact difference, but I want to say it's 400 feet maybe.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're talking, this is, if I were to be extremely conservative, at least twice the distance.
Okay. Obviously my concern, and I appreciate the applicant's recognition of the concern as well as the issue is with, obviously what we don't want is a repeat of what has happened with the other entity on Hanley. So I'm going to get a little specific here. How often are the dogs taken outside?
The dogs are outside if the weather is nice. They're always supervised into smaller groups. We are very aware of the sound that the dogs make. So one of the things I'd like to point out is we are currently located on Manchester Road in Rock Hill. If you look at our building, we sit literally, our yard is right next to an accounting firm. So if they look out their window, they're staring at us. And in the first year of operation there, we did have a complaint because the dogs were barking. And we have residents directly behind us that have not complained, and when it was addressed with the city, we took the necessary steps to deal with the dogs in terms of soundproofing materials, and then just knowing when the dogs are making noise and not allowing dogs that are big barkers into the facility. I brought a couple of things, and I actually have something to give to everybody, so if I can do that, just in terms of soundproofing stuff that we do. So and I'd like to try to explain that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So one of the main reasons we're leaving Rock Hill is because it's a smaller location, and two, we are aware of the noise issue. We know that dogs bark and people don't want to hear dogs. We selected 1695 Hanley specifically for its location because before we look at any location, we look at where is it in relation to our neighbors and other businesses. And for example, our No Leash Needed West location is at 141 and 44, and there's no neighbors anywhere around us. We have businesses on both sides of us, but no issues with sound, except the sound inside that bothers us while we're working. So that's why we selected this building. And what I'd like to do is just kind of show you that we have a proactive stance on sound, not only for the neighbors, but because we have to be able to work and hear while we're in the building. So when you're looking at kennels, there's two main things you have to focus on: the interior of the building and the sound that comes out of there, as well as the exterior. And on the interior, a lot of the sound is bleeding out. So what we do is we hang up vet baffles, which you'll see them in gymnasiums and that type of thing. They hang from the ceiling. I brought one with me there. Shannon, can you actually pick that up? So these hang from the ceiling and actually absorb the sound, and we have installed these all over the interior of our facilities to prevent that bleeding of noise. If you look at the second page, you can actually see some of the interior shots of how our facilities are set up. The second thing we do inside is we use rubber flooring. That also helps cushion some of that noise indoors and absorbs it. Now on the outside, it gets a little bit trickier. And what I found on the outside is the best solution to sound on the outside is to not be near any neighbors. And that's, like I said, why we selected this location. But on top of that, there is a product called AcoustiFence, which actually sits on top of a fence. And it's almost like a thick rubber, and it actually blocks out sound and reduces what's coming out of it. It's used in applications such as railway systems, heavy machinery, to really keep that noise quiet. Now, I spent a lot of time at the location while the APA had their dogs out, and I did hear their dogs barking, but it wasn't anything excessive. And honestly, with the noise that comes off of Hanley Road itself right there, it all kinds of drowns out. And we're prepared to do any of the soundproofing options that are there, but I think the strongest point about this application for us is the fact that it is so far away from everybody else, and that you have an existing business there doing similar stuff that hasn't had any issues.
Well, and I appreciate all this information. This is very helpful. But as far as the what hours of the day are the dogs let out?
During the daytime. So the dogs are out around anywhere between 8 a.m. and about 5:30 p.m., and then they are walked outside with an employee at 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night for a last let out. But they're not out playing. They're with an employee, and so it's like walking your dog. That's about as much noise that you would get.
Individually?
Yes, individually.
And you have 35 to 40?
Yeah, and the
On
only
average,
time
spending
we might
that.
have two dogs if they're from the same family, so like a brother and sister dog. But yeah,
Okay.
they're taken out separately.
I understand the concern about the residents, but I have some concerns about some of the businesses that
Okay.
are close to your proposed location as well. And my concern is that if you have some people in an office building, and whenever these dogs, and I'm not sure I got the answer yet as to how long they're out at any given time. I think we got into that, and then we started talking about
Okay.
the soundproofing. How long are they, if the weather's
It
nice?
depends. If the weather's nice, they'll be out for a few hours at a time. They'll come in for a nap time. They'll go back out for a few hours at a time. The groups are constantly changing depending on when our clients come in and out. Dogs get taken in, taken out, that kind of thing. So if it's a beautiful day, they could spend 5-6 hours outside.
Well, I don't know. I'm really concerned about the sound, I guess, is not knowing enough, but
Right.
because if we recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen and they sign this thing in, and then it turns out we have a lot of people in Hanley Station who are bothered about this. It's not just at night, but during the day,
Right.
because they are only a little more than 300 feet, it looks like, from your proposed location. I don't know how far the sound travels, but I guess I just have some real concerns.
Okay, well, Mr. Wise, let's address that. What are the remedies that are available to the city in the event this business goes in and sound is an issue?
Well, I think it becomes difficult. I think the first step is identifying the conditions that the commission identifies up front. Restrictions on hours when the dogs can be outside, restrictions on the numbers of dogs, requirements for what type of soundproofing has to be put in place. That's the first step. Moving outside of that, if we use our existing dog facility as an example, we do monitor it for compliance. There is a noise ordinance with various thresholds. If they're above those thresholds, it becomes a violation, and they have to come back and address that. Similar to the other facility, how they came in, they installed some additional soundproofing. Didn't completely resolve the noise by any means, but it did bring it into compliance with the city's noise ordinance. Much beyond that becomes difficult.
So with the addition of that soundproofing fence, if I remember correctly, the applicant in that case volunteered to do that, didn't they? Because I think there was a sound engineer took some readings and said there was just a small violation, wasn't there? It was for a short period of time.
And dogs went outside.
Yeah, but it was like as soon as they went outside, there was technically a
There was that
violation. And the spike,
When
and then
they
it
went
went
outside,
down.
they would get excited, and they would get, they'd have that short spike where it would exceed the ordinance.
And so now that the fence is in, are there no more technical violations of the city ordinance?
That's correct.
Okay. They're hearing dogs, but it's not to the level where it would permit the issuing of a violation or a ticket or something like that.
Correct. Given that they're operating a dog facility under a conditional use permit with the city, that they've done the noise studies in the past, they brought it into compliance with the noise ordinance.
Okay.
And Mr. Wise, I believe that fix was identified by the sound engineer at that time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that's an option for the commission here, just to make sure these concerns are addressed. Let's engage the sound engineer to head this off at the pass and see if he has any concerns about this. And if he does, have him identify some potential remedies that the petitioner can take into account. Mr. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to take a moment to address the sound. I mean, it seems to me that the precedent case that we had, if I understood you correctly, 400 yards, or was it 400 feet? I mean, that's a substantial difference from 1,700, and in some ways, it's in a noisier part of the the district. With that said, I just can't imagine that it's going to be much of a nuisance. I mean, the train going by, the traffic on the street. Certainly, it might be closer to the hotel and some of the condominiums there, but at the same time, I think that those sites are pretty used to a high level of ambient noise, so.
And if I may say one more thing, the building, we're actually looking to purchase this building. So our purchase is contingent, of course, on us getting a permit. But this building, its prior use was in manufacturing, and it had a lot of cranes and machinery in there. So the building itself has been soundproof, and I'm guessing from its location in that light industrial zoning is that the sound levels there were okay at the time. I don't know if they had complaints when they were in business, but that was the prior use of the building.
Other questions from commissioners? Mr. Lewis?
Question for Justin on, were the businesses right behind that building notified?
Yes.
And none of the owners had any issues, or any of the tenants have any issues, or are they aware of this?
I have not been made aware of any issues.
I concur. I'm a little worried because of our prior experience with the dog issue, so we need to be careful here, I think, so.
I think that's right. Let's see if anybody's... in just a second, ma'am. Absolutely. Are you...
I just have one quick question, Mr. Chairman. Justin, the letters, they go to the property owners, not necessarily to the tenants? Is that correct? Or do they go to the tenants as well?
They go to the tenants.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see if someone's here from the community. Is there any member of the audience who would like to address the commission on this? I'm sorry, ma'am, do you want to step up?
I'm a co-owner.
Oh, okay, well, step up. I thought you were from the audience.
Sorry, no. The one thing that I want to state is I know many of you were concerned about
what has happened before. And what is different, very much so, is the size and the number of dogs. So the spike that you were talking about, when dogs immediately run out, it does. The barking spikes for about 2 minutes and everybody calms down. The main difference between us and the business that is already there is, like she said, the groups that are being let outside are about 15 dogs, 15 to 25 dogs. That means that that spike in barking level is much less than what you would get when you're letting out 50 to 70 to 80 dogs at a time. And so what happens with us is we are very aware of the sound and the noise, because not only is it annoying to the neighbors, but if you're standing outside with those dogs and they're barking nonstop all day, we have actually asked certain dogs, hey, listen, this probably isn't a good fit because your dog barks so much that it does become a nuisance. And we have actually kicked out dogs due to barking. So that is a concern even with us, not only you guys. I know it sounds funny, but we kick out dogs because of that.
And what's your name for the record, ma'am?
I'm Shannon Mayfield.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Plovka?
Thank you. Justin, is the volume of dogs down at the watering bowl, is that really 70 or 80 dogs?
Yeah, there's a lot of dogs down there. I haven't counted them, but there's a lot of dogs.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We're going to listen to the audience here. Sir, please step forward. State your name and address for the record.
My name's Greg Twardowski, and I represent the building that fronts this property on Hanley Road, 1699. I just got the notification, so I'm not too prepared, but I'll just make a couple of comments for you to think about. First, unbeknownst to most, the primary tenant in 1699 South Hanley that fronts Hanley Road is Post Holdings. Not only is it Post Holdings, the cereal company.
Okay.
Their headquarters are right down the street. Not only is that the primary tenant, but there are 3 very significant corporate groups that comprise this Post Holdings space, and I think they will express significant concern. I'll get to that in a minute. The secondary tenant, although the name Wayland Securities on the building, the second primary tenant is a division of the Moneta Group, Financial Services. It's called Retirement Planning Services, and I think they too will express concern as a result of their clientele in the building. And then I own Wayland Security in addition to the building. Part of my concern, and I don't know the business, so I can only express concern and don't want to make assumptions. I'll just make a few comments for you to think about, is it's hard for me to equate this to the APA. In that you really can't think of it in relation to the APA. You have to think about the APA doubling or tripling. That's what this does. So it's not the same. The APA is a relatively quiet neighbor, but I don't think they have the same number of dogs. So you're going to at least double, if not, you're going to at least double the number of dogs outside during the day. And I think the noise will be a significant problem for the business tenants in my building.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other member of the audience like to address the commission? Ms. Charbonneau?
Thank you, Mr. Damon.
And sir, you're next.
Louise Charbonneau, 8833 Madge. It's funny how coincidences happen, because I saw this item on the agenda and didn't give it any thought. I really didn't go over to see where they were. I knew they were close to APA. The coincidence is that last fall, my daughter actually did a month as an employee of the APA. She's the biggest dog lover you're going to run across. In my recollection, it is not their practice to put out a whole bunch of dogs. First of all, they have a large cat population too. And in my recollection, it was 14 or 15. Now, she's currently teaching a class with dogs, so we can't call her and confirm that. Had I known, you know. And as far as Justin counting the dogs down at Watering Bowl, count the feet and divide by 4.
Thank you.
But because I've been a city hall watcher now for over a year, I was in on the complaints and the things that you tendered with regard to the Watering Bowl complaints. Mr. King testified that he had installed a $15,000 fence, if you recall, as trying to do the noise abatement. So he was going to demonstrate peak if you came now to him and said, we've got to close you. The one-time spike that would have resulted in a noise citation was during the period that our noise man was monitoring. Now, with regard before the installation of the fence, the sound engineer couldn't give a guarantee as to what the actual mitigation of any sounds were going to be. So perhaps the material that the young lady is suggesting is more effective than the fence that Mr. King put in, I don't know. But we still have the same complainant. She's weary, but it does appear to be a single complainant with regard to watering bowl. My general travel direction is west on Manchester. I'm familiar with the no leash. I've never seen any real activity. I've never seen a whole bunch of dogs. It looked like a pretty quiet. Now, I don't live there, but it doesn't sound like it would maybe have the same traffic draw, at least where they are now. And I presume that what we're doing is Dublin space, so whether that's relevant or not. I just want to add my 2 cents as historian on the piece, because just to remind you of how much he spent to try to remediate. But one other coincidence, I located the other watering bowl location by accident. It's at Lee May and Lindbergh, right above the St. Vincent de Paul Society thrift store, which I frequent because I'm a junk dealer, antiques dealer. Every time I go there, there is some dog out in that yard at the watering bowl, which fronts, there's no neighbors, this is all retail. That must be a Mastiff. This guy must go 200 pounds, and I'm not going to try to imitate his sound. But there he is. Now, he's not breaking the law, but oh golly, if he was down at 1650, or down where the watering bowl is, there would be some talk. So thank you for listening. I know that this isn't required in the format of your meeting, but it means a lot to me. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks for your points. Yes, sir.
My name's Barry Jarrett, and I live at 1060 Rockman Place in Rock Hill. I'm here on an unrelated matter, so I don't have anything in this deal. I live, coincidentally, around the corner from No Leash Required, and I drive back and forth on Manchester all the time, and I gotta tell you, I've never heard them at all. And I don't have air conditioning in my car, so my windows are down. I'm back and forth all times of day, in the evening, never heard them. Okay, thanks.
Very good, thank you. Any other member of the audience? Well, these points that I've heard tonight are sufficient for me to endorse this sound engineer option, but I'll leave it up to the commission as to how we want to proceed. Everybody okay with that, Mr. Demmett?
Well, what would you suggest on the sound engineer, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'd suggest that we engage the same sound engineer that we had for the watering bowl, have the applicant provide accurate numbers to the sound engineer as to number of dogs, when the dog's going to be outside, the type of materials that they're proposing in terms of this location, have the sound engineer evaluate whether the extent to which we're going to have sound issues, and to the extent there are sound issues, options for the applicant to consider to remove those sound issues.
Will he'll have to guess though at the at the sound accumulation of what the anticipated use is, won't he?
I don't know.
I think it's definitely a worthwhile idea, at least to find out if the sound engineer can provide us with any guidance from this, as opposed to us just trying to figure out whether it's going to be a problem or not. As you know, as we heard from Mr. Tardowski, I will relate. We had the building up here at Pine and Brentwood. That's where our law firm was. And what came in next to us was a car stereo store. They installed car stereos. And now granted, they were much closer to us than what the businesses would be to this proposed use. But I tell you, I don't want to minimize the concerns of businesses. I think they're just as important as the concerns of residents with the noise. And so I think we need to be very careful when in looking at this applicant, because when you're trying to be on the phone and you're on the phone, you're trying to get something done and you have loud noise and it's bleeding into your building, it's very, very troubling. So I like your idea of retaining the sound engineer, at least if nothing else, just to talk to the person, find out if he or she can give us some help.
I think they could they'll have the numbers from the Y, or not the Y, APA.
Yeah.
So certainly they'd be able to, maybe some extrapolation could take place with those numbers. Other than that, I have significant concerns based on some of these objections that have been raised by neighboring citizens, business owners. Yeah, Mr. Nordberg.
That was what I was going to suggest, is take the numbers and go out by how many dogs there are, and then you can get a level that would maybe calm Mr. Trojanski's concerns or whatever. The other kind of sound that I'm worried about, it's like when the train goes by, it's loud or whatever, and people just accept it or whatever. But it's the properties up on the hill. That the watering bore is almost straight behind. You go up about 300 yards, and there's a property up there. That's a lady that's complaining. And I can understand having the noise go up the hill or whatever. You know, it's like I live on Collier Avenue, and I can hear down the park or whatever, the kids playing the soccer games and that sort of thing. It comes up the hill. I can understand that a dog barking would go up the hill and you could hear it, and you can be inside your house and you could hear it or whatever. And then if you have more than one, it can become a bigger issue. So I think we really need to, like you said, do the sound engineer and see what he comes up with.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you. Really, this is a question for Ms. Christie. I'm looking at the site plan, and this does not show any improvements regarding a play area or a fenced-in area, but if I could ask, wouldn't that be on the west side of the building?
Yes.
Please step forward, ma'am.
Thanks for asking that, because I was kind of wanting to elaborate on that. So if we have a fenced-in area, it would be on the back side of the building. So it would be closest to the Metrolink. If you look at that building, and I don't have the site plan right in front of me, but there's parking in the front of the building, and then off to the back and to the side by the Metrolink is where it would be. So you wouldn't be able to see it. It's set much farther back than the APA's area. And we are very different businesses, but I will say that the number of dogs we do take is similar. It's nothing excessive, so.
Okay, thank you. I would just add some flavor. It seems to me that, yes, sound engineer is warranted. And if they've addressed that with acoustical fencing in the past, and it's somewhat solved the problem on South Hanley, given the nature of this site, particularly if she's operating on the west side of the building, I would feel very confident that any ambient noise that could permeate over to Mr. Twardowski's office building could be mitigated.
Ms. Christie, I would think you would endorse that approach as well.
Oh, absolutely. We really like this building. We really like Brentwood. We are willing to do whatever we can to make this work. These are things that I take very seriously. I understand his concerns. I don't want to butcher your last name, but I understand his concerns. And if I had an office building, it would be a concern of mine as well. What I can tell you is I know how I run my business. I know the approaches I've taken. I know how much money I've spent to look for ideal solutions. And the best solution for us is to get distance away from a building. And, given the distance his building is away from the building that we want, plus the fact that our yard would be on the backside, our building in the past was used as a machine shop. I'm not that concerned about it, but we will do whatever. The Acoustifence, blocks out an elevated train noise. I mean, it's better than a soundproofing fence. In that soundproofing fences, they have to be a certain height to really give you any type of relief from that noise. So the problem you're having with the other places, the sound just travels up, but the Acoustifence actually blocks and absorbs the sound from going up and over. So.
Okay, very good. So does anyone have an objection to engaging this sound engineer on this application? Unless he may not be able to give us an accurate opinion as to what's going to happen, and then we'll have to take that into account. But I think our due diligence requires engaging him at least.
I concur.
Okay. Any other member of the audience like to address the commission? All right, good deal. Then, Ms. Christie, we will engage. Please work with Mr. Wise with respect to the sound engineer, and we'll see if we're ready to have his report by the time our subcommittee meeting comes up by the end of the month.
Okay.
Which is currently set, just for your information, on March 25th.
Okay. So should I be here for that meeting as well?
Yeah, well, let's coordinate with Mr. Wise to make sure we're going to have our opinion before then. We do need to have that opinion before we take up your petition. And that, does anybody have an objection to that being at 6 p.m., March 25th? Okay, March 25th at 6 p.m., Ms. Christie. But please make sure you coordinate with Mr. Wise. Yes, Mr. Neuenberger.
Do we need to have them indicate, like Jeff said, about the fencing area on the site plan, where you're intending to put it, and if there's any landscaping around it and that sort of thing? Should we have that for our site plan as well?
I think those are good ideas from both. Can you make sure the site plan's updated to reflect that?
Sure.
Perhaps include some photos, too?
Okay. Do you want 20 copies of the same big site plan?
I'll work with you on
Okay.
that.
Okay.
All right, very good. We may see you on the 25th. If not, we'll see you next month.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, are the old business items ready to be taken up? Okay, Mr. Golterman, if you want to step forward, or your designate. Next item on the agenda is a petition for rezoning for 290 Industrial Court, also taken up with a petition for site plan and conditional use permit approval for that same site. We've taken this application up at our February regular session meeting and our February subcommittee meeting. Mr. Golterman, if you could bring the commission up to speed on what changes have occurred on these petitions since that time.
So I think it's outlined in your packets, but what we've done to, are you specifically talking about the building facade?
Yeah, not only the commission, but the audience as well, as to what's happened since the last regular session meeting.
Okay, so what's happened since the last regular session meeting is we obviously went to subcommittee. There were some suggestions made on how to improve the building, to improve especially the facade that faces Strassner Road. For this tenant, we engaged an architect to put together some elevation plans which would enhance that facade, increase the landscaping on the site, and make some improvements to make the building a little more inviting. One of the other items that was brought up was the change to this building from light industrial to a planned development. There was a concern brought up that's hopefully being addressed in a text amendment that right now prohibits R&D uses in planned developments. And so that was hopefully going to be addressed tonight as well. So those would be I would say, the major items that were discussed.
Okay, Mr. Wise, can you briefly summarize the conclusions of the subcommittee and otherwise give a staff report on this revised application?
Sure. I think to start with the first petition for the change in zoning, there was significant discussion about the change, whether UD or PD would be the more appropriate district. There was discussion about UD having a little bit higher density allowances in it, more site coverages allowance in it, and then it also has more of kind of a residential focus. And I think the subcommittee came to a consensus that the railroad tracks was kind of a logical break between kind of the expansion of the PD district within the Hanley industrial area, particularly along Strassner, and that the railroad tracks would kind of be the change for that designation from the UD to the PD. So I believe the subcommittee had a strong preference for the PD zoning designation. As far as the site plan, I think the applicant hit on a lot of them. I think one of the primary focuses, if you look at their resubmittal from their architect on the second page, where it shows that facade from Strassner, which is kind of the new front door with the retail storefront added into this, in really kind of trying to address some of those maintenance issues or kind of rebranding the building as a commercial building. And that's what their proposal really seeks to get at here. Some of the main features that they've addressed, they have added quite a bit of landscaping for the building. If you look at the first page, which shows the site plan, on the north side of the building, you'll notice the existing condition has the parking lot coming directly up to the facade of the building. If you look at the next page, basically what they're proposing is to pull that out and add, a landscape buffer between the parking lot and the building to give it a little bit nicer look, a little bit fresher look, and add more green to the site. They've also included kind of a new retail storefront plaza area in front of the proposed Miriam front door. Again, kind of giving it that more retail look to it and allowing people to come in and out of the door without walking directly into traffic. They've included a fence for the storage area. It was discussed at the subcommittee area. There was a lot of discussion about I guess I'll call it canopy that hangs off the east side of the building, in that it really kind of brought down the look of the rest of the building. They did say that they would like to continue to use that area as they're hoping to have some outdoor storage there, which is also why the fence is shown on the elevation now, is it'll provide the screening for that outdoor storage area. It does leave that canopy as it exists today. The only, or the primary issue that staff has addressed right now, the parking aisle is a couple feet short of complying with the city code. So it would need to be 23 feet for the two-way traffic. Or conversely, they could, change the orientation of the parking, put 45 or 60 degree parking and stripe it as a one-way parking lot through there.
Okay, so let's go through. I just think the site plan is a significant improvement. I don't think it includes everything that we had discussed at subcommittee, but let's see what the applicant's thoughts are on some of these lacking areas. First, I don't note on the site plan that the canopy on the east side is reflected as being replaced. What's the petitioner's position on that?
So, assuming the assumption is we cannot paint it, I was just on the phone with the architect, and we concluded to give it the cleanest look would, if it'd be permissible, just to remove it as a whole from the building. We had to verify with the architect to make sure nothing structurally was essentially embedded in the building. And then our thought process is still put up the white vinyl fencing, but just remove that metal structure as a whole.
Okay, and then I recall the commission also discussing sconces. It looks like you have 3 sconces there. Is there any objection to including sconces all along the north side of the building?
No. We would, if we just could mark it out, we could have our architect call it strategically place them so there's some consistency along that facade, that matches along the new landscaping that runs along there as well.
Okay, and I see that you did include some additional landscaping, but I believe the subcommittee had discussed additional landscaping along Strassner. I don't see that reflected. What is the applicant's position on that?
We'd be okay with adding landscaping depending upon what was requested.
Okay, and
I'm assuming you're talking about in some of the island areas and whatnot, the front entrance where the curb cut is.
Right along Strassner.
We're not adverse to that.
Okay. And then you heard Mr. Wise's concern with the drive aisle.
Yeah, so the only, and we had our architect, unfortunately, we couldn't redo the site plan quick enough for tonight's meeting, but our architect addressed that. One of the conclusions he came up with, and Justin, I don't know if you could verify this, is you could pull back, again, they were doing this so we could, I would say, get this done all in a timely manner, but they can also pull back some of the curbs where it adheres to, so we don't have to go to just one parking aisle instead of 2? What did Toby Headinghouse forwarded an email saying on what we could do as a remedy?
I think the comment was, if you pulled it back a couple feet, you could keep it as is and meet the 23-foot requirement.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you were to leave it as is, you could change the orientation of the parking and go as a one-way.
Our preference is, especially because I'd say this is retail and we have to adhere to I think it's, don't quote me on this, the 45 spots, is that we could pull it back a little bit to adhere to the 23 feet. That would be our preference.
So remove the landscaping area?
No, it wouldn't be removed.
You would lose approximately 4 feet of it.
Of the landscaping area? Okay, well, I do appreciate the petitioners taking into account many of the concerns that were addressed at the commission. I would ask that to the extent we do want to take this up, and we're certainly not obligated to take this up tonight, if we need to do more discussion, we can do so at the subcommittee meeting, but to the extent we do want to take it up tonight, let's make sure that motion takes into account these issues that the applicant just addressed. Mr. Plufka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see the signage indicated in the last packet of material. You had a monument sign and you had placement of it and some sort of not to scale drawings with regard to that. I don't see that in this. Am I missing? I don't see.
It's not actually in this.
I'm going to leave the signage up to you.
I think we did at the subcommittee meeting, we did present a sign. And
Yeah, but we talked about placing it in a little different place, I thought, because of its proximity to Strassner.
And that I thought we would work with the city after this was approved.
Am I remembering that wrong, Justin? Am I remembering that right?
You're remembering correctly. And I mean, I think essentially what this comes down to is there's 2 options that the applicant has. If they're willing, if they're able to just comply with the city code, they can just address this later through a sign permit process where this would be part of the staff review, as it would make sure that it complies with all site distance requirements.
Okay.
And I think that that's what the applicant has indicated, is that, they'll install, a 5-foot maximum monument sign that meets city code requirements, so it doesn't have to be shown in this process.
I think that was the assumption we were working under.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to add to your comment about, I really like the landscaping option, especially pulling the angle of that parking on the western side of the northwestern side as it angles in toward the entrance on not on Strassner, but on Hanley Industrial. I think it looks really nice.
Agreed. Mr. Demmett?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the site plan, a couple of things. The air conditioning compressor units over on the far west side, I'm sorry. You've got it, the proposal is, it looks like some type of landscape blocking it. Do you see it on there?
It's on the north elevation. It's on the north elevation picture.
Yeah, I'm sorry, right.
Yeah, so and so currently those are not screened.
Right.
Right, so we'd be screening those with landscaping, and then right now this is of course just blank warehouse area. So our intent would be, we're gonna have to add HVAC units to obviously condition their space as well, and the intent would be, of course, screen those with heavy landscaping as well.
Well, I'm wondering, what about just moving it up onto the roof? And then screening it up on the roof and getting that up off the new landscaping. Because in order to landscape, you're going to have to, under your site plan, you've got green where there's currently a parking lot.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to raise them anyway to do that. So I'm just.
So unfortunately, we have not done any MEP design criteria yet for you guys. But I would say roof would be an option. Or I would say probably the most logical would be also taking up space behind where the white vinyl fence is as well, and piping in on that side as well, where it's screened and you don't even see them at all.
I like that. I'd be fine with that.
Okay.
And you mentioned that the proposal is to remove the metal corrugated.
Yeah, it would
right?
It would be gone, so we'd have to reflash the roof area on that side. We would, of course, have to paint, and where there's screws that actually go into that masonry wall right now, so it'd be removed. We'd obviously tuck point that area and then paint that side as well. So the intent would just be get rid of this, I would call it a metal shed type, and just be done with it.
Okay. And so that area would be uncovered.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
And they said they were okay with that tonight.
Okay. And then finally, the site plan does not reflect, there's a utility pole right to the left of where it says Miriam on the building there. You see where the utility pole is in the site plan?
I do.
That's about the correct location, but it's on the north side of the building. It's sitting right where some of your windows are going.
It's right there. Yeah, it's right to the,
Chip in the phone.
it looks like it would just be the utility pole. It's almost adjacent to the building, and it would just be to the left of the storefront window.
Yeah, I mean, I pulled it up on the
Right.
wonderful Google Earth here while we were talking, and I mean, it looks like it's approximately 10 feet in off of the corner. Well, Kevin, can I use that thing right there? Yeah,
Here. We have a picture as well.
Take a second.
Mr. Demmett, we're going to need to take your phone and admit it into the record.
Get back in a year or so.
Kept in city custody.
That's right.
There we go.
Will this zoom automatically, Kevin, or do I need to focus on it?
What's going on here?
So, where is it? Oh, I see it.
Yep, there it is.
Thank you. So I don't know how far, I don't have a scale, Mr. Golderman, but it sure looks like on your site plan, that thing is right in front of your proposed storefront windows. And I'm just wondering, were you aware of that? Are you planning on taking that down, moving it? Are you going to leave it there?
I think without a doubt, we didn't perceive this being a conflict until you just brought it up, and didn't realize it was causing an issue potentially on the storefront glass. I don't think the intent, of course, is to have a utility pole block the storefront glass. So I think we can investigate either relocating the utility pole. We would have to call Ameren for that and see what the remedy would be. But I think, of course, the intent is not to block the glass.
Right. Well, if you're going to make that call, my suggestion is also ask them about moving the other utility pole that's in front of the building. That's also depicted in your site plan. You've got a tree kind of blocking it right now, and you've got the electrical service. There's two of those. I'm not sure what they call those things. The hoods that go into the building, and it's fairly unsightly there. If you're looking at moving one, I'd ask you to have them take a look at.
I have no objection calling Ameren and finding out the best way to address it.
Okay, great. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Other points from commissioners? Mr. Lewis?
I think this plan is a lot better than subcommittee, but my only issue is it seems like this is the entrance to this area here. And although it's a nice paint job and everything from this colored picture, I think there really needs to be something done with this roof line. We have Fonbon across the street that did a really good job of updating their facade, and I think an improvement there on the top of that roof line would be beneficial.
Mr. Golderman?
So we took this to Gray Design and we looked at what practical remedies are. And so you have an elevation of the building, the front part, that kind of looks like a house, kind of, that fronts the west side of it goes west. And then if you look at where Iron Man Sound Studio is, it's a warehouse. And so putting in glass storefronts obviously does not make sense, or faux glass storefronts that we felt didn't make sense entering the warehouse. Also from a security perspective, you have clear story windows that are there right now. We have offered, and we think this will look architecturally good, is that we've offered to replace all of those clear story windows. What we did not do was extend them down. Again, part of that was aesthetics, part of that was security, but also what we also did on a painting scheme, we felt because the west side of the building was more that brick color, we proposed matching the same type paint color to that building. I don't disagree with you that this is, people come in here to the entrance of the park. We felt, based upon what is there currently, this is almost like night and day on an improvement. Right now you have asphalt that basically comes up to the building that's just a zero lot line. We've also, as opposed to what was first originally shown, we created a huge bump out of an entrance for Miriam as well. And then the area that does front where the warehouse portion is right now, I mean, the landscaping we added was, from a screening perspective and just from I would call it an invitation to the park. We've heavily landscaped that area that runs along the warehouse portion as well. So I don't know what else we can necessarily do. Comparing it against Fontbonne, I was not a part of when that building was reskinned, but that's also an institutional school currently, as opposed to what this building as it sits right now. It was the former location of Southside Roofing. So again, with what we have to work with here and with what the current use of the building is now, we felt we made significant improvements.
Well, I think that's true, but you're also requesting that it be rezoned PD.
Correct.
Other points? Commissioners, Mr. Nuremberger?
I was just going to say, with rezoning as PD, don't we get, if it comes back before us in the future or whatever, if there's another site plan for another use, could it come back to us for the whole property or whatever, not having just one use or whatever, and then we have another chance to talk to them about any improvements in the future?
Mr. Wise?
I'm not sure I completely followed you.
I'm saying he has two tenants right now.
Right.
One is new, one has been there for a long time. If there's a change in the other half of the building or whatever, from a warehouse use of maybe to a retail or something else, if it goes the way we hope, wouldn't they have to come back through us to do another site plan for that as well?
It depends on what they were doing. If they were making exterior modifications, yes.
Okay.
But if they wanted, if it's a permitted use and they're just moving in and maybe only doing work on the inside, then they wouldn't necessarily have to come back.
Well, the only thing I wanted to add to that was the second part of tonight is and I'm talking more from practical purposes, is a warehouse use after tonight will become conditional. And hence we would have to, or whomever this owner is at this time, we would have to come in front of the commission if a warehouse use was ever to be permitted again in this building. And so I think we would have to come in front of the commission. And then if we were, I think also from a realistic perspective, is if it was a permitted use, right? If it was a permitted use and we'd come in, I think from a realistic perspective, the permitted uses that are now allowed would be retail, general office. And I think from that standpoint, the reality is we would probably most likely be cutting in probably storefront along Strassner, or I'm just looking at it from that perspective. But I think if we wanted to focus on if another warehouse use would just come in here and no other improvements would have to be done to the building, I think that's a concern to the commission. Once this tenant's lease is up, and let's say another warehouse user wanted to occupy this building, we would still have to come in front of the commission and try to attempt to get a conditional use permit.
That's, I think that with all the improvement that they're doing for the site currently, I think it's going to be much improved from what it is currently. And you have the railroad tracks. It's not really, the Cliffs Point is not the entrance of the city. The entrance is out in Hendry Road or whatever, and coming on Strasser or whatever. And then they're the next phase or whatever. And it would be the start of the new PD district or whatever, going all the way down Strasser, because I think that's our intention, is not to just rezone this location, but have it go all the way down Strasser on both sides as any other application come before us and that sort of thing. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, good points. Yeah, Mr. Plovka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to Clint's point with regard to the changes in elevation, I mean, it doesn't have to be the same material as Fontbonne, but you know, that facade that's there over the doorways, and the changes in elevation in terms of the height of it compared to the rest of the height of the building is a pretty attractive design feature. And I do like the improvements that are made and with the landscaping, and I think it's very creative the way you pulled the parking lot away from the building a little bit and added green space. Would there be any thought given to changing the facade, at least over the doorways or where the fabric awnings are, changing the height of that roof line, or at least the false height of that roof line? You could also use that as a screen for HVAC, but behind it. You see what I'm saying? As a way to break up that line of the roof that's just one line.
Right, you're
all the way
looking to
across.
see if like a parapet wall or something would be added.
Yeah. See, I knew somebody would know what the actual term of what I was trying to describe would be. Thank you very much. No, you're right. You're exactly right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Is there any... and like I said, it doesn't have to be the same material as Fontbonne, but...
Right.
I don't know. I thought, there might be a way to both be able to screen that HVAC equipment as well as break up the line of the roof.
Right. I mean, one of the issues of putting, first, from a practical matter, we're probably going to put the condensing units on the ground just from a structural engineering perspective, because you have to structurally brace rooftop units. But again, we haven't made a final call on that. And again, I'm not the MEP engineer either. From raising the roof line, I just don't know aesthetically if that will look funky. And then from a height perspective, I believe the building is 16 foot clear. I have not exactly measured, but I think it's a 16 foot clear building. It also, it's somewhat deceiving here because the building drops. And so you look at Miriam's entrance, right, and it drops down. So there has to be an ADA ramp in the interior of the building. So it's probably less than a 16-foot elevation then, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, but it's probably still anywhere between 12 to 14 feet, if I'm guessing. To add that from an elevation standpoint, I don't know, because I haven't dove into the cost, and I just don't know.
Okay. Other questions from commissioners? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 8833 Madge is my address, which you may recall is 300 feet from a PD zone. I had some questions on this issue, and Justin helped me very much. And following the site plan committee meeting, subcommittee meeting, I was discussing this whole situation with a friend, and we came to a point of logic, perhaps. At the end of site plan review, I brought up the 300 feet and changing PD, which is to me a significant in my life with regard to Brentwood Boulevard being a commercial strip. And the proposal now is to amend the PD to allow warehouse or some such, or my concern, of course, was that R&D could come onto the boulevard, and my house will be in the shadow of a nuclear medicine research facility. But speaking to logic, we have an LID zoning that has already been text amended once, I believe, to permit the 30% retail, with it, which is where it's contiguous to what the main part of the building is being used for. Did somebody say a parts manufacturer has a counter where you can walk in and purchase what's being made in that building? So logically, it would seem to me, leave PD alone. You're opening a whole different can of worms, especially with regard to the commercial strip on the boulevard, and retext amend LID and up the percentage with regard to retail to 50% or whatever, to accommodate this particular proposal. And I am gratified by the upgrades that have been made with regard to the concerns that the commissioners had. But just appealing to logic, it still makes sense to me to still go through the LID, which is the purpose, I believe, of the whole Hanley Industrial Court, and further amend LID to increase as a CUP the retail use within a building. And I don't know if 50% would be like right now. I don't know if the building with the 2 tenants was subdivided into 50-50 or 75-30. But surely you could come up with something that would be more logical to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, Ms. Charbonneau, I see your point. I think from a pure logic perspective, I think that is logical. But I think the goal and the aim of the commission at the subcommittee meeting was to have PD all along Strassner from this location all the way west to Brentwood.
Because there's already a zoning PD on the other side of
Right.
Strasser, and it would just be logical to go all the way through, the same.
And then just one other point, just to me, the distinguishing factor of an LID district has always been the lack of retail,
Right.
or at least a very minimized retail presence. So to the extent that we remove that limitation on LID, what's left? So those are my points, but from a logical perspective, agreed. Would any other member of the audience like to address the commission? Okay, commissioners, what do we want to do? We want to kick this out to subcommittee, or does somebody want to try to make a motion?
We have to do 2 motions, correct? Or can they both be together?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we need to do 2 motions.
Well, I'd like to find out what they find out about the 2 utility poles.
Right.
And I'm not sure that do a condition on that. I mean, if they're willing to say that they would agree to have those removed, then I don't have a problem making that a condition to the motion. But I don't know that they're willing to make that concession.
I think that's the one sticking point I'm not sure we can resolve tonight. Gentlemen, do you have a thought on that? I think that is an issue we need to resolve, and I'm not sure how we can conditionally resolve that issue. Or would you be comfortable with a motion that called on you to remove those utility poles?
I guess it would depend upon what else was asked tonight.
Well, I think we've
on the building.
Sure, I think we've reviewed. Let me just review them, and commissioners supplement or revise as you see fit. But in addition to the site plan as revised, I see the canopy on the east side being removed and the resulting area being tuck pointed and painted, sconces being expanded all along the north part of the building, drive aisle consistent with our code, additional landscaping to the satisfaction of staff along Strassner, and then the HVAC units moved behind the vinyl fence.
Did you mention the poles too?
Well, I think
Then the poles would be the one other
right.
issue. Anything else?
That's 6.
Thoughts? Do you want to kick this out to subcommittee one more time?
I'd like to request if we could we'd be willing to relocate the utility pole with Ameren on the side where Miriam is. And then, and when I say relocate or talk to Ameren, you know, do we remove the utility pole as a whole and just put the electric underground there?
Talk about the other one, which,
Sorry. So first addressing the utility pole that's in front of the Miriam storefront window is either it's relocated where it's not in front of the building.
Okay.
Or we investigate with Ameren just putting the electric underground and the utility pole goes away as a whole, having those two options. But either the utility pole goes away and it's not, or when I say goes away, it is not in front of the front facade of the building and it would go off near the train tracks, or it gets just removed as a whole and it just gets removed as a whole and the electric goes underground right there.
you know, I don't have any objection to that, Mr. Golderman, but there is a utility pole right over there anyway, and no, I'm not an Ameren employee, but I would imagine they're going to say, well, we've already got one. So it might be wise just to say, let's tie it to underground.
Yeah, and I'm not an Ameren employee. I'm just trying to, I'm not an electrical designer, so I don't know if they give me the option. I guess I'm just asking for leeway, because if they come in and say, we can't put electric underground there, we have to relocate the utility pole off to the side, I just want that as an option, just in case from a practical perspective.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that.
I agree with the standpoint. I don't have any issue relocating it so it's not in front of the building.
Okay.
The other request I'd like to have is on the utility pole that is closer towards where Iron Man Sound Studios is, if we would have the option just to heavily screen that with landscaping. More so because it's still a warehouse use there and it's a pre-existing condition, and we would screen it with, again, I would assume we'd be submitting a landscape plan to the city, which you would have to approve.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that approach. Mr. Lewis?
Chairman Damon, am I on an island by myself about the roof line?
Oh, I think we're all on your island, but I think that, I think we've extracted enough from this applicant.
Understand.
Somebody want to try to make a motion and maybe just incorporate what I just presented along with?
Well, I would like to make the motion for the first part of the rezoning. That would not include the site plan.
Correct.
So that would be to change the zoning from the light industrial to the planned development. Then do we have to make any other stipulations? No? Okay. That's it?
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? This is just on the rezoning application. Roll call.
David Plefka?
Yes.
David Diven?
Yes.
John Nurnberger is yes. Jeff Moore?
Yes.
Clint Lewis?
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nurnberger. On to the next item.
I will make the motion as well with all the stipulations that we just outlined. I don't know if we have to go through it.
I'll summarize what I have to make sure. So we have removal of the metal canopy on the north side of the building, extending the sconces along the entire facade along Strassner, moving the HVAC either behind the fence or to another a location that's not visible, relocating the pole in front of the Miriam storefront or placing that service underground, screening the utility pole by the existing Iron Man use with landscaping, complying with the city code requirements for drive aisle width, and additional landscaping along Strassner.
Did you mention the canopy?
Yeah, removal of the metal canopy in the back, yeah.
Is that your motion, Mr. Nurnberger?
That is.
Is there a second? We can have further discussion.
I just have a quick procedural question. Was that just to recommend approval of the site plan, or was that to recommend approval of the site plan and the conditional use permit?
Oh, it should include the conditional use permit as well.
Yeah, that's what I think I was,
And it should also explicitly mention in there the provision to allow the outdoor storage.
right. That also, I would amend my motion then.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, roll call.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
John Nurbury is yes. David Dimmitt,
Yes.
David Plefka.
No.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. And I do want to thank the petitioner. I think this is going to be a significant improvement to this property, and we appreciate you taking into account the concerns of the commission throughout this process. Yes, Mr. Goldschman.
I have a question about the proposed text amendment. How is that addressed?
Well, I think we've
haven't
got
addressed
one
it
more
yet.
item.
Okay.
And then we'll have discussion on that.
Can I ask a question just about, Mr. Chairman, about this vote and the rationale that would accompany it, I suppose, to the Board of Aldermen? Is it appropriate at any point in time to debate and then come to some consensus about, for instance, as John pointed out during this discussion, he indicated that this, that the notion that we were sort of piecemeal, a parcel at a time, rezoning parts of Hanley Industrial Court, and we're doing it as applicants come in. Is there any consensus among this commission, or is there any way in which we can come to some consensus that we could accompany this vote to the Board of Aldermen with some sort of, again, for lack of a better word, the rationale that might say we would appreciate some guidance, perhaps, in terms of whether or not they would prefer us continuing on this application-by-application basis, or whether we should, or whether the Board of Aldermen would want to adopt some sort of more comprehensive approach to the Hanley Industrial Court, rather than having us go one lot at a time. Is that even something we can do? I'm asking the question. I don't even know if this is an appropriate way to do this.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. But I think the consensus of the commission, I think, is pretty clear that we do envision that whole area on either side of Strassner to Brentwood being PD. And to the extent we want to put that on as an agenda item on a future meeting.
Well, I mean, it'll certainly be brought up when this
Okay.
is presented to the board.
And that's
that
kinda-
was the rationale in
And that's kind of
approving.
what I wanted, was because John did say that, and I think everybody kind of agreed that was the consensus. I don't know that we had a formal discussion about it, but I just wondered if that was going to make its way into the rationale.
It absolutely will.
Okay, that's all I really wanted.
That would be part of the comp plan as well.
Right.
I
Well,
would
sure.
think, yeah.
Well, the comp plan's less
Yes.
specific,
Yeah.
but
When,
okay,
when
that's
this
fine.
application moves forward to the board and I prepare the rationale,
Yep.
that discussion with 1501 will absolutely be included as to part of the justification that the commission.
Thank you,
and part of
Justin.
the
Thank you, Mr.
discussion.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Plufka. Next item on the agenda is a petition for conditional use permit and site plan approval for a coffee roasting facility at 1001 Hanley Industrial Court. Is the petitioner here? Yes. Will you please step forward and introduce yourself, sir, and your application?
Good evening, Commission. Kevin Leahy on behalf of Dubuque Coffee Company. This is a startup coffee company that would like to begin sometime in April in leased premises at 101 Hanley Industrial Court. It is currently, as the outline conditional use request indicates, currently PD, and we believe that the use that we envision conforms to the PD. It's surrounded on three sides by light industrial. The coffee roasting company is described in the application, and I believe it conforms with the surrounding neighbors and everyone in the community. I don't think we've outlined, according to the conditional use permit, we've outlined all the basics that it doesn't seem to impact in any negative way, either the density, the traffic, or any of the neighboring businesses or communities. And we think it's a clear fit. In an abundance of caution is why we filed this request. And we certainly want to take this time to thank Mr. Justin Wise for his patience and professionalism in walking us through the commission's plans and intentions. And we wanted to make sure we did everything we could to conform, or at least answer all the questions that were in addition to any questions that might arise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leahy. Mr. Wise, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject tract is a 1.76 acre parcel of land, zoned PD. It's along Hanley Industrial Drive. So this is the site that we've been formerly talking about within the industrial court that was previously zoned PD as part of a redevelopment project that never came to be. If this site were located in the light industrial district, it would be permitted by right. And however, with it being in the PD district, it does require the conditional use permit. In talking with the applicant, staff had identified two primary concerns that are both addressed in their application in the addendum that they submitted that talks about the application itself and the use itself. Those two issues, first was the impact of truck traffic on the site. They have a low volume as far as truck traffic coming into the site for deliveries, and they're usually vans or at most a UPS truck size that makes a delivery. So it's not going to increase large semi-traffic through the area. The other concern that staff had identified was the potential for odors that would emit from the building itself. They have identified the piece of equipment, and I don't recall exactly what it's called, a catalytic oxidizer or something along those lines, which will address the odor so that as the ventilation leaves the building, there is either negligible to no odors associated with the use itself. So with that, staff has no other outstanding issues.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners? Mr. Demmett?
I was wondering if we can ask that they not put on that catalytic oxidizer. I actually love the smell of coffee. I just want to make sure you're not requesting to do any retail here. You're not going to be selling any of this. People aren't going to be coming in. There will be a counter where you can do any of that.
There's no overt retail business. If somebody walked in, a neighbor walked in, one of our neighbors, and said, "Hey, can I buy a bag of coffee, a 5-pound bag?" I think right off the line or something, they would accommodate that. There's not going to be an associated, as I understand right now, a front door cafe or anything like that.
If they were going to do something like that, Justin, they would need to come back, would they? Or
it would depend on the specifics.
For nothing else, for parking? Or?
Yeah, it would depend on the specifics of what they were doing. And so until they had a proposal, I would be skeptical of answering that question. But I would say there's a pretty high chance that they would end up back in front of you.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had.
In an abundance of caution, we would want to get your permission to make sure we were in compliance before we ventured forward.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application? Mr. Lewis?
Just a little clarity, any delivery trucks, how many in and out? Are they going to be parked there for a while or anything like that?
No. The envision of the operation is usually a one time a week, as Mr. Wise indicated, a large drop-off shipment of whole beans. And then they are then delivered. The small unit trucks are taken home by the sales staff, and maybe 2 trucks might be there overnight on the property on an occasional basis on the routes, but small.
Good.
Any other questions? No. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we recommend to the Board of Aldermen to approve the conditional use permit and the site development plan.
Second. Roll call, please.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
John Nuremberg is yes. David Dimmitt,
Yes.
David Klefka.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leahy.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the text amendment that we discussed at the last subcommittee meeting. And we're in the preliminary stages of that discussion. You'll recall that Mr. Wise was designated with the task of addressing the commission's concerns about allowing limited research and development as a conditional use within the PD district. Mr. Wise, can you just briefly, I don't think we're going to be prepared to act on, we don't have a text amendment in front of us, but I think we may be prepared to share some general consensus on this tonight, and we can take it up at a future meeting. But Mr. Wise?
So, following along that, basically, if you look at the staff report, the tenant did provide to us some language that's used for the Cortex development. And so you've got kind of a bullet point list of how they set up their research and development district in there. So I've provided that to the commission with the hope of basically getting some feedback. Certainly when you look at some of these uses, they definitely fall more within the light industrial district realm. So I was looking for feedback from you all on which of these uses or similar types of uses would be acceptable that the commission would want to potentially further entertain, if any at all.
Sure. And so, speaking for myself, my thought on this limited research and development conditional use would be essentially a no lab coats or goggles type approach. We're not talking about significant laboratory research here. I don't think that would be consistent with PD. At the same time, I think if you look at Mr. Wise's list there, my thoughts would be item number 2, general office and administrative uses related to business and or research, and then 6, classroom teaching and other academic uses. That's where I thought the commission was going at the subcommittee meeting. But I'd like to hear from the other commissioners on that point. Anybody have anything?
No, I think that was my understanding as well, Mr. Chairman. Because because of the concern as expressed by Louise, with all the PD that we have to be very, very careful that we just don't open the door.
Right. Agreed.
What about the ancillary retail? Wasn't that part of it too?
I don't, and I guess to the larger point there, with the general offices and the administrative uses, I don't think a text amendment for the PD would be required. Offices are already allowed in the district. I don't think we necessarily need to clarify, whether it's, an office for use A versus use B if they're performing office functions in that space. The same thing when it pertains to the retail. Retail is already permitted in the PD district, so having an additional layer of retail on there, I don't think is necessary. The classroom teaching and other academic uses that are ancillary to the certain other primary permitted uses. Again, if someone were to have a perfect example of this, while it's not PD, it's in the light industrial district. Carboline has accessory educational facilities where they bring people in and do classes, and it just falls under an accessory use. So if that's what the commission is looking to entertain in the PD district, I don't think a text amendment is necessary.
Okay, Mr. Golterman, is anything that we've said with regard to our envisioned research and development permitted use inconsistent with what we discussed at the subcommittee meeting?
Yeah, so a few of my concerns would be the comment on no lab coats and no goggles. I think it's a slippery slope. When I look at, and also I think that's why I got the definitions from the Cortex district. And I think, and not speaking for Cortex, but I think they would brand themselves as probably the premier innovation district that's becoming, within the St. Louis area. But when we say, and some of the recent tenants that have moved in there, and that's where I think it's a slippery slope. So A.B. Mowry or Fleischman just moved in the 4240 building there. And so they do R&D when it comes to bread making and I believe they wear coats in there. Speaking from experience, I just finished up the Bissinger's redevelopment up on North Broadway, and they have an R&D component in chocolate making. So I think, and they wear coats for food prep, and they have to wear safety hairnets and whatnot as well. So what frightens me a little bit is just the perception of using the terminology of lab coats and goggles when it comes to R&D uses. Because again, there's several things that fall under R&D. It can be engineering, where you're working on computer games, you're working on electronics in a clean room environment, or, everything from class 100,000 to class 10,000 clean rooms. You can have a pharmacy component where they're wearing lab coats as well. And so I guess what I'm alluding to here is I would just hate to throw out generalizations when we're talking about what R&D uses are out there, because it just doesn't mean arsenic chemicals, which I think, generally those are regulated by the federal government a lot of the time as well, and city codes as well.
Well, when I see assembly and light manufacturing, I don't think by any means that's what was envisioned or discussed at the subcommittee meeting.
Okay. So I guess the terminology, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you in the fact I would like to see, if this was addressed, is what's the definition then which would be permitted under light assembly? Because again, I'll go, and if someone is creating a video game or if someone's working on a circuit board, is that perceived as light assembly or light manufacturing? And candidly, I don't know the answer to that or how that's perceived. I just think it's an issue that might arise.
Mm-hmm. But aren't we kind of getting to Louise's point a little while ago, and that is that to use the broader definition you're talking about, it doesn't, if we don't differentiate, if it's all PD, then that means that other areas that we had no intention of opening up to this kind of use would now be appropriate in those areas as well. And aren't we getting to what the concern was that both at subcommittee and tonight a little bit, that if we're too broad with how we define this, that maybe coming at it from the other side, as Louise indicated, and looking at it in terms of modifying LID as opposed to modifying PD, almost makes more sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the commission was very clear at the subcommittee meeting. I don't think and maybe there are circumstances in which research professionals would wear lab coats or goggles, but I don't think that experimentation, I don't think that manufacturing was discussed or envisioned at all. In fact, I think it was just the opposite at the subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, so I think I understand your point, and I believe it needs to be better defined for the purposes of, especially if, and I'm speaking just from a personal standpoint and just real estate trends and office trends, is if the intent is to keep making more of the properties in Brentwood as a whole, or just focus on Hanley Industrial PD, I think this issue might keep coming around because I would say a lot of startups, and I guess it's how you define, again, R&D, and I think that's the biggest issue. If you take a lot of the startups that you hear about in the paper, like in T-Rex or in CIC and Cortex, they do have, a lot of them have an R&D component to them. But again, I think how you define that R&D component. Now, it might be software related, or it might be some technology related R&D component. And that's one thing, and that's the reason I brought it up, is to the detriment of Brentwood, is just excluding uses, just to exclude them, where from a practical standpoint, it might be a very good use.
No, I think that's right, but I think Ms. Charbonneau's point is well taken. I think we should, as we approach this exception, we should consider whether or not we want that type of use being right next to a residential area. As we go through each of these bullet points, is that a use that we want right next to a residential area? And I think it's a discussion best had for another day. I think we're open to and we've been consistent, we're open to the limited R&D use in the PD district. We're open to working with you to find a solution that's best for this community. So to the extent you can come up with ideas and share them with Mr. Wise, I'd suggest that Mr. Wise take a stab at putting something together, understanding. And if commissioners, if you're hearing anything that's that you think differently about, let's hear it. But I think this is consistent with our discussion of the subcommittee meeting, and then we can take this up at next month's meeting. Mr. Wise?
I guess I'm a little concerned. I mean, essentially tonight we've had a lot of discussion about what is the future of the industrial park. And I'm thinking maybe, we've got the comprehensive plan that's open right now. We're going through that process that, we might be putting the cart in front of the horse to some extent, and that maybe this is part of a larger discussion on what's the future of that area from the property owner's perspectives, from the city's point of view, and get all of those, and that may foster this discussion and lead us to where the right answer should be.
I think that's a good point. And we're going to discuss tonight that we do have a meeting coming up with our comprehensive plan consultants. So perhaps we could reserve this discussion to take place, at least in part, at that meeting. Anybody else just briefly tonight before we take that up again? Mr. Plufka?
Thank you. I wonder if maybe one of the approaches might be to focus in terms of the text, talking about what is produced by the R&D. In other words, not so much focusing on text that describes what R&D is taking place inside the building, but what waste it produces, what, those kinds of things. Because when we're talking about PD in close proximity to residential, what we're really concerned about, I think, at least to a large extent, is what is it producing, what and what are safety hazards for the folks that are living right next to it. And so maybe an approach might be to not only talk about the activity going on inside the building, but focusing maybe a little bit more on what's being produced by the activity in the building.
I think that's an excellent point, including sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
I would 100% agree with that statement.
All right. Yeah. Excellent point, Mr. Plufka.
Just one last question. So if the comprehensive plan, obviously it's a fluid process, but comprehensive plan, you're meeting with the consultants, what would be the process if some company approached once a building was put in PD? Would it be looked at as right now it's a non-permitted use, anything that falls under R&D, whatever that might be and how you define that, would it be looked at then by staff and the commission at a case-by-case basis if then a text amendment would be amended to permit that use if it was thought favorably?
I think that's right. I think the commission would need to determine whether or not the use was consistent with how we've defined that permitted use.
Okay. Fair enough.
On that point, if it's a software engineer and they're sitting at a computer all day, I don't look at it and say, well, they're doing research and development. I say they're operating as an office use. Mm-hmm. And so they're allowed currently today if they were to come in because they're at a computer, and that's no different than anyone else sitting at a computer in an office.
Okay. That's right. All right.
Okay.
So to be continued.
All right. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. So to that end, we have let's see here. Tell you what, so Mr. Wise, when are we meeting with this comprehensive plan consultant?
The proposal would be to schedule it for Monday, March 30th.
Do we have anything else to take up at subcommittee this month?
We have the one item that was sent there this evening.
Subject to the sound engineer's
Subject
analysis.
to the sound engineer's analysis.
All right. Well, what is the availability from the commission for March 30th? Available? 6 p.m.? Okay, so Mr. Wise, can you just very briefly explain what's going to happen on March 30th?
Sure. The consultant's going to come back and kind of give a summary of all of their findings. And then they're going to give their proposal for what they think, the recommended path forward for the city is going to be. So they're going to kind of give us a brief summary, essentially a presentation of kind of, recapping the process that they went through, any major findings that they had, and then, if the recommendation is everything's fine, backing that up with, these are the reasons we've come to that conclusion, or any changes that they would recommend, they would support that. And then it would basically open it up for discussion and questions that may come up.
Okay, in the interim, before that meeting, can you do some research as to, I think Mr. Pluff got a good point about how we'd like to limit the R&D use?
Absolutely.
And look at some of these other municipalities, how they've approached that?
Yep.
Maybe have some ideas that we can take, the commissioners can take to this March 30th meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then let's put this on our April regular session meeting as well, this text amendment.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything on that point?
So we're not going to do the 25th site plan?
Well, so my understanding is right now we are currently set March 25th at 6 p.m. to the extent that we hear back from the sound engineer on the no leash needed application.
And I'll confirm that as quickly as I can, but no later than, the Friday or Monday before. So I'll let everyone know through email. And then, of course, if we're having a meeting, the agenda will be posted. And
so to the extent we don't hear back, we'll just table that to the next regular session meeting. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, and then we're going to meet March 30th at 6 p.m. with the comprehensive plan consultants.
And then March 25th is at 6 too?
Yeah, does that work for you?
Yes.
Does that work for everybody else, 6 p.m.?
Is that at the rec center across the street?
location to be determined.
Okay.
Okay, aldermanic report. Don't see any aldermen. City planners report.
No report.
Okay. Subcommittee and comprehensive plan meeting. I understand we have a significant membership that we're going to see at both meetings. Appreciate that. Rationale, Mr. Wise, can you handle?
Yes, sir.
Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.